Fantastic. All right, cool. So we are calling all of our leaders of the next industrial revolution. And to do that, we are going to green speak with confidence. I am your guide today, Liana Fricker. I am founder and inspiring chief at Inspiration Space. I am a venture catalyst. Innovation and entrepreneurship are my jam. I didn't start as someone who would have said they were interested in climate change. And then I did carbon literacy training, and everything changed from there. I was able to see the world in a whole new way. And through carbon literacy training, I realized that entrepreneurship is the greatest vehicle that we have to create the world that we want to see. And we can use our businesses to adapt and mitigate climate change. So who is this session for? This is for startup founders, companies one, marketing pros, product brands. And this is really key because as communicators, we have a responsibility around how we discuss our own sustainability and how we encourage others to do that. And when we do it right and we do it well, we are taking individual action as part of a group of people that are all trying to change the way that we live. We are undergoing a significant period of human-led activity, which is called the Anthropocene. And there's evidence that shows since the Industrial Revolution, the way that we live is negatively impacting the environment. And a big part of this is all in our overconsumption, right? We live in a full world. These red dots show you how the Earth has been warming over time since the start of the Industrial Revolution. If you're feeling overwhelmed by some of the green terminologies, you're afraid of unintentionally greenwashing, this is a moving target. By the end of this, you will have a lot more confidence in your ability to tell your story and also to know the edge of your knowledge, because that's one of the most important things in sustainability. Some of the solutions that we need to do this perfectly don't exist yet. And this, again, is why entrepreneurship is so important, because it's up to us to create some of these solutions or to inspire other people to create those solutions, to support them in your role as a coach, as a writer, as a marketer, as a product creator, as a maker. You have a role to play in this change. So what this will allow you to do is to see where you're doing well. Then we're going to know what we need to focus on to level up. There's no wrong or right answers. Maybe some of us are communicating what we're doing really well, but we need to fill in some of the other holes to elevate the purpose behind your business, to not only, let's be real, make more money, but to do it in a way that's beyond just the profit. Now, the jargon might be challenging, but it doesn't have to be. And it starts with the science.
Just 10 minutes from Canada's busiest highway sits this serene lake, which holds the secrets of human history.
It's an incredible sight.
Tim Patterson and his team of geologists have spent years studying Crawford Lake. Created 13,000 years ago by a collapsed cave, the little lake is incredibly deep, reaching down 24 meters. The bottom is so well protected that it's become like a time capsule, absorbing thousands of years of history. When the geologists retrieved samples of sediment from the lake floor, they found its layers were like the rings of a tree, each line offering clues to its age. These layers, for example, formed during a terrible drought in 1935. But by around 1950, the chemistry of the lake began to change.
When essentially there was enormous economic development as the world recovered from World War II.
Radioactive plutonium was found in the mud, thought to be from nuclear weapons tests thousands of kilometers away. The sediment showed effects from acid rain and fossil fuels, and some microbe species began to disappear.
And now we've changed the character of the system so much that we're actually leaving a geologic record of human activity.
Crawford Lake is unique. No other body of water on Earth is known to contain this combination of attributes. And this little lake has now caught the world's attention.
The Anthropocene thesis and
This international panel of scientists announced Crawford Lake had been chosen to mark the start of a new chapter in Earth's history, known as the Anthropocene, or the Age of Humans.
human beings as a species are becoming the greatest force of nature.
This renowned Canadian photographer produced a documentary on the Anthropocene, the world-altering event that some scientists consider comparable to the extinction of the dinosaurs.
And today we're having a slower motion extinction event, but we are now the equivalent of a meteor impact.
Scientists are still debating whether Anthropocene should be considered an official epoch, and samples from Crawford Lake will be used as evidence.
It is the first step towards the potential ratification of Anthropocene as a geological epoch.
And Crawford Lake also offers hope. In recent decades, as the world reduced nuclear weapons testing, acid rain, and coal-powered production, something incredible happened. The lake began to heal. Jeff Semple, Global News, Milton, Ontario.
What do you think about that? The fact that there's actual evidence that shows our impacts. The good news is we have an opportunity to change that. Small businesses generate 4.4 tons of CO2 each. We make up 36% of the total amount of emissions in the UK. And research shows that 44% of us don't believe that we can make a difference. And at the same time, 68% of us are concerned about a rise in costs, inflation, cost of living, energy. This is all connected. And one thing that I can say as a sign of hope is that the world is changing and it's becoming a compliance issue, it's becoming a procurement issue, and it's a legislative issue. What I've decided to focus on today is the Task Force for Climate Financial Closure, because that's actually having the most impact on small businesses because of the supply chain. The impact of that is companies are reevaluating their whole supply chain and demanding that everybody also track, measure, and manage. So people are winning and losing new business contracts, retail distribution, investment based on their ability, not necessarily because they have to comply to TCFD, because if they want to work with a company and they are part of that supply chain, the company needs to know what the impact of that is for their business.
Hello, Daryl here, answering any question you've got on net zero, carbon neutrality, or any of the various compliances such as, SBTI, TCFD, ESOS, SECR, etc. And we love hearing questions from you. And we've had a question sent in. Farah, what's today's question? Yeah, wait for it. What's today's question?
So this is actually something we get asked quite frequently.
Yeah.
And the question is, what is TCFD?
What is TCFD? Okay, fine. Look, what is TCFD? TCFD is an interesting piece of legislation in the UK, and it stands for the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. That's the TC, the F, and the D. It is enshrined in law at the moment for the larger companies like banks and building societies in the UK, and it is being widened in April 22 to cover another batch of companies, specifically companies with over 500 staff and 500 million turnover, and it's being pushed out even further. So by 2025, all UK large companies, so over 250 staff, roughly 40 odd million on the balance sheet and turnover, all of those will have to go through TCFD. It's also, interestingly, it's a global standard, so it's not just UK, and it's all born out of the really fantastic work that the SBTI folk are doing, and all of that gang. They're doing some really fantastic things. And so it's not just the UK. I think the UK is probably slightly ahead of the curve in terms of enforcing it, but that's happening now, on a global scale, which is great. What TCFD says is that you must consider how you, as a company, react to climate change as it happens. You have to think about what are the risks to your business, what are the opportunities to your business. You have to say what you're going to do as a company in order to stay on top of monitoring the situation and how it's impacting your company. You must, I think there's right at the bottom, put in there, you've got to do something like a GHG Scope 3 full carbon footprint analysis and set metrics and targets against it. And, all of this information should be disclosed. So this is not a private piece of work. This is generally aimed at larger companies, public companies anyway. But the idea is that you go back to your shareholders and say, look, we realize the world is changing. This is what we're doing about it. And the TCFD disclosures take people through it stage by stage. What's the governance? What's the strategy? What are the risks? What are the metrics? They're the 4 key pillars of it. And that has to be done and maintained. So, and the more companies that actually think through, well, what is happening and what is the impact on our business? I think the more companies will then start thinking, well, actually, it's not great, and actually start taking action to reduce their carbon footprint. And, whilst one individual company won't change the world, if more and more companies take this view and actually do something about their carbon emissions, then it's got to help. It's got to help. And, fantastic if it does. So I'm a big fan of TCFD. It's starting to happen now. It's going to go like that, believe me. Yeah, okay. So there you go. That's TCFD in a nutshell. I hope that was useful. I'll see you next time.
The next global trend we're going to look at is ESG. The reason why I chose ESG was because you will find that a lot if you're working in a service-based business, say delivering coaching or marketing or anything like that. And that's environmental social governance. And effectively, it's a score that companies get that show how good they're doing. And it's a bit of a popularity contest in the sense that CEOs want really high ESG scores. And in more companies every single day, bonuses are being related to the ESG score that they get. Promotions are being connected to the ESG scores that they get.
This is The Conscious Investor presented by Nuveen. I'm here with Martin Kremenstein, the head of retirement and ETF solutions at Nuveen. Can you talk to me about the ESG metrics and what do they measure and how good are they of measures of social responsibility and where do they fall short?
Sure, so ESG stands for environmental, social and governance. And what that really is a framework for analysing companies and really assessing how well they compare to their peers in terms of performance against these metrics. Under E, you have, for environmental, you have water usage, waste production, and general kind of environmental behaviour, like how efficient they are at managing their resources and also looking after the environment around them. Under social, it's around how well do they treat their clients, how well do they treat their workers, and then there are also some diversity aspects around the management and the workforce. And then under governance, I mean, that's around share class structure and governance structure within the company. How well run is the company? And when you take it all together, what you're really looking at is another way of assessing a company without looking at its balance sheet and looking at how it impacts the broader society at large.
And where do these do a really good job and where do you think that they fall a little short? What can't they measure?
Sure, so I think what they do a good job in terms of how well is company A doing compared to company B. But it's less good, I think, at looking at what is the overall mission of a company in terms of is it out there to do good, and if so, how do you manage that? I think the other way where it kind of falls a little bit short is that it's a little bit of a framework. So lots of people have different views around what is more important. For some people, it's around environmental that's more important. For others, it's social. For others, it's governance. As many people as there are in a room, there are going to be different opinions as to what actually is important. And so, unless you are going to go and build a bespoke portfolio for someone in a separately managed account, there's going to have to be some degree of compromise around how that ESG framework is actually going to be applied.
And are they self-reported? Are companies sharing these metrics with you, with investors at large?
Yeah, so most of the data is public. It's a combination of self-reported and also analysis done by analysts who are poring over company fact sheets, their regulatory reporting and so forth. So because of that, you do tend to get better reporting from larger companies, but you can get reporting for companies all the way down the cap structure, cap size, and also internationally as well. We're able to produce an ESG framework that enables you to look at large cap value as well as small cap, but also emerging markets and developed markets as well.
And do you have advice for people who want to invest along their values and who maybe haven't spent a lot of time looking at the ESG metrics? What is some way to get them over the hurdle where it feels like there's just too many options and they want to put their money where their values are?
Sure, so I think there are a couple of things. First of all, they are going to have to define for themselves what's important to them. There are certain ESG providers that have a very specific slant to how they're doing it, and they have to decide whether that's what they're looking for, whether it's based on religious or certain other social aspects. If they're looking for just general, ESG and in terms of a framework for companies that are better stewards of their, the environment and social, then really they should either look for ESG providers. There are certain companies that have been in this space for a long, long time, and all ESG funds will be labeled ESG or responsible investing or impact because, if you have an ESG fund, you are going to put that in the name somewhere. And then you need to look at how the products work. Look at the criteria by which companies are being scored. That should be very, very clear and apparent within the fund's literature. If it isn't, maybe then move on to another provider. If you're looking at your retirement plan, maybe talk to whoever runs your company's retirement plan and ask them about responsible investing options for that plan.
Is there a trade-off? Do you feel like that you can still make money and invest it responsibly?
So historically, the knock has been that to actually have responsible investing, you had to give up some performance. I think we're seeing now that isn't the case, and we're actually seeing, lots of times where using an ESG framework can actually help you avoid companies with bad practices. For example, we had the Equifax scandal sometime last year, right? Well, Equifax had actually been downgraded by major ESG data providers over data privacy and security issues about 18 months to 2 years beforehand. Within our large cap growth ETF, Facebook hadn't been included because it scored relatively poorly compared to other tech companies over data privacy concerns.
That was not something that I ever considered as part of the ESG framework is data privacy, but it's very important to a lot of people. A lot of people are divesting from Facebook now. How does that metric work in ESG?
So when you're looking at a company, when the data provider is scoring the company, so we use MSCI as our data provider. When they score the company, they score it based on all the different criteria, and under social, data privacy is in there. But also when you're looking at controversial business practices, which is another way of scoring companies, you look at things that could be controversial. And so the data privacy thing had come up from the 2014 kind of conversation Facebook had with the government. So that was something that was always on the radar. And so Facebook doesn't have a particularly bad ESG score on absolute terms, but compared to the rest of the tech sector, which tends to do better, it scored relatively poorly. So within our large cap growth ETF, right, it scored poorly in tech. It didn't make the cutoff for tech, so we didn't have it in there. So, last year, as Facebook did quite well, our performance suffered. This year, without Facebook in there, our performance has done quite well.
And divesting seems to be one way in which a lot of people want to express their values. Is that something that you're seeing and how effective is divesting as a method of making a difference?
So divestment is one tactic you can use. I think, we have certain industries where we do divest from. So weapons manufacturers, alcohol, gambling, tobacco, and then nuclear power. However, those are industries that we feel that they're put in that sin stock basket, and so we divest. Beyond that, I think if you are just doing straight divesting, what you are doing is taking yourself out of the conversation with the company, with the issuer of the stock. For example, if you were to divest from energy companies, you couldn't actually be in a conversation with them as a major shareholder, encouraging them to look at, say, renewables. Right, so you need to kind of weigh up divestment, which is, all right, I feel good because I'm not invested in what I think is a sin stock, versus, well, I have no say in trying to influence that company's behavior. So it can be a little bit self-defeating because you've now removed yourself from that conversation with the company.
And how much does it cost to be a socially responsible investor? Are fees higher on socially responsible investment products?
Not particularly. I mean, we price our ETFs somewhere between the straight kind of market cap weighted benchmarks and, smart beta. And when you look at how we're scoring the companies, someone once said to me, well, it's very much like non-financial quality factors. So you can look at ESG as almost like a smart beta overlay, particularly when you consider the risk management aspects of it. We actually put together a series of portfolios using all the building blocks within our ESG ETF suite, and it came in most of the time under 30 basis points. So we think investors can actually, invest according to their beliefs without paying over the odds to do so.
And could you talk about that a little bit, like the smart beta and the benefit from not investing in things like Facebook?
Well, so if you think about the factors themselves, they are effectively how well run is the company. So you're looking at quality factors, right? And quality is one of the more nebulous of the smart beta major factors. And so you could say, well, actually, this is just another way of defining quality in a company, right? Does it waste resources? Does it look after its customers and stay out of trouble with the regulators? And does it have a decent management structure that encourages accountability? And so by having that framework in place, you're able to avoid companies like Volkswagen, BP before the Deepwater Horizon incident had actually been downgraded and removed from major ESG indices over concerns about its outsourcing of maintenance of offshore oil wells, right, which is precisely what happened there. So it's really a very, very good risk management tool. And MSCI did research, and I think they found that companies in the bottom 10% for ESG score had a much, much higher likelihood of what they deemed to be a catastrophic or a material drop in share price from an incident, and by material they were talking 90%. And so by actually having this framework in place, you are really putting in place a method for trying to avoid tail risk from companies that are badly run and may end up having serious scandals in the press.
When we're thinking of this, it's all about brand equity, cost saving, innovation, and talent. Now, brand equity, because it allows you to stand out against your competitors. Because when consumers are saying they want sustainable products, they also want independent brands. People like to know that they're supporting not a faceless corporation, but another human being. So if when you're looking at your marketing and how you tell your sustainability story, make sure that you're talking about your mission, your vision, your values. And by considering the impact that your business makes, you can go through and say, do we actually need to send this with 2 pieces of tissue? Is there another way that we could reduce some of our packaging, even if it is biodegradable? And then we can tell customers that the reason why we're doing that is for the environment. Now, yes, it's going to save us money, but we can tell them that we're changing the way that we deliver to them. We're taking away some of that whole unboxing experience by saying, we've decided to remove this for the planet, and it's going to show up in the fact that we don't have to increase our costs, because the reality is the cost of these paper goods to source it properly is becoming more expensive, and we don't want to pass that cost on to you. And we also want to reduce the environmental impact. So we're reducing our packaging. And then again, with innovation, it's about finding new ways to do things and collaborating with others. It might be a take back, a repair. If you're a service-based business, a new type of consultancy, thinking about going all in on sustainable marketing and using those principles as part of your USP. Because so many brands, one of their biggest challenges is they need to be working with people who understand this, and they can't have the risk of business as usual. And so when they're going through their supply chains and they're looking for new people, the lingo, you might be able to unseat an incumbent because they're not thinking about it in this way. And then all of a sudden you've got the business. And then from a talent perspective, we all know that the younger generation, they really do care about the environment. And so what we see in recruitment is that by having a very transparent and open and inspiring sustainability story, you don't have to pay people so much because they'll work with you for the purpose. They'll choose working with a purpose-led brand and sacrifice salary than the other way around. Now, we're going to demystify the jargon. So sustainability is all about ensuring that we have a balance between the environment, society, and what we're doing with our businesses so that we are not taking more than we get. So you can see here, we've got social, we've got environmental, and we've got economic. And in sustainability, we're just trying to balance those things. And because we're small businesses, bearing in mind our sphere of influence, we don't actually have a lot to balance. So we're going to look at some of these buzzwords. Now, we've already covered sustainable and what that means. Then we're going to look at green. You've heard green, people saying, oh, this product is green. What you're looking at is it's all about minimizing the environmental impacts throughout the life cycle of what you're doing. That's a lot more obvious when you've got a physical product, maybe less so when it's a service-based product. So if you define greenwashing by not giving clear, transparent evidence to back up the statement that it's green, or in this example, eco-friendly. So to say that a product is eco-friendly, it shouldn't be causing any harm to the environment. Now that's really challenging to be able to stand like with your hand on your heart and say, I 100% can say that this product is eco-friendly, unless you've done an extensive life cycle analysis to show that at every stage of production, use, and disposal, it positively contributes to the environment. So it's got to be qualified, it's got to be transparent, and it has to be clear, and it can't allow for any ambiguity. So if I see you using the word eco-friendly, I have to be able to assume that you've done a full life cycle analysis. And then if I said to you, what's the emissions footprint of this, or how does this impact the environment, you would be able to tell me that. Similarly with zero waste, I see a lot of things marketed as zero waste. There's some very specific standards around that, and it can't be creating any additional waste. So even like some things that are recycled that are marketed as zero waste might fall foul of the Green Claims Code if it's not very clear how you dispose of it on the packaging. If, say, for something that's zero waste, there needs to be recycling services available for 60% to 90% of that market that you are saying it's zero waste, because if they can't dispose of it in a zero waste form, it's not zero waste for them.
What I want to do is increase the amount of work that I'm doing with it and the results that I'm delivering, so that I take it onto a higher level than what is just basic standard. But the stuff you're talking about now for a small business, maybe if you're in a corporate world, that kind of jargon is going to be every day, because you're going to have maybe a whole department working with environmental stuff. But there's like me and 2 part-time staff. There is no environmental department. It is me. So all of this stuff is like the phraseology, and I'm not familiar with it at all. So I'm saying no to stuff, but I'm doing a bit of it.
And you know what? That's exactly, and this is why we're all here. And this is one of the challenge that we as small businesses have, right? Is that it can feel so big and so overwhelming. And part of it then is also becoming more comfortable with the language.
I've got a product-based business, and we try very hard not to do greenwashing, although I am starting to wonder what the actual definition of that would be. But for example, if we were to say something like, we only use soy-based waxes, we don't use paraffin waxes because that's harmful to the environment when people burn them. But if I say we only use soy waxes, is there a danger that people go, actually the soybean plant from wherever in South America is destroying, the environment because there's so many being made? And am I pushing something without really knowing the background? How far back are we taking all these this detail of the sourcing to be really confident that we're not conning people, if you like, not conning people, trying to promote that we're green when actually potentially it isn't. Is that greenwashing? Do you see where I'm coming from?
I do 100%. I think there's a really important nuance there, which is when you're making clear and transparent claims that aren't misleading, it's exactly as you said. We use soy. Yeah. Where it might get tricky would be if you say, this is a planet-friendly candle because we use soy. If you were to say that, you would then need to add a sentence that qualifies what that actually then means, which is why sometimes it's better to not qualify it as being planet friendly or green or eco, because then all of a sudden you almost get yourself all twisted into knots. You can't do it with as much confidence because you've added that qualifier. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's about less is more in a way.
Exactly, because when we look at the Green Claims Code, where the problem is that if you were calling it planet friendly, that's going to be a marketing ploy to try and sell more, to capture more attention, intentionally or unintentionally, right? So then it's your responsibility to then educate the consumer, because with the Green Claims Code, you have to assume that people don't know anything, because you got to assume they don't know the science. So it's your responsibility to educate them if you're going to make that claim. Planet friendly or green or eco, because then all of a sudden you almost get yourself all twisted into knots. And the story that you want to tell, which is how it's made, the provenance, how amazing it is, the smells, all of that, you can't do it with as much confidence because you've added that qualifier.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly, because when we look at the Green Claims Code, where the problem is that if you were calling it planet friendly, that's going to be a marketing ploy to try and sell more, to capture more attention, intentionally or unintentionally, right? So then it's your responsibility to then educate the consumer, because with the Green Claims Code, you have to assume that people don't know anything, because you got to assume they don't know the science. So it's your responsibility to educate them if you're going to make that claim.
Okay.
And don't try and join keeping up with the Joneses by then throwing out these greenwashing terms where you don't have the evidence to back it up.
Can I just say something? I've just written a note as well, but the problem is that absolutely accept all of this. The problem is that we've got in reality, you've got a small business. Our customers don't have time. They sort by seeing these words that are triggers. If we're not using those kind of trigger words, if you've got great products and stuff and everybody else is like the big guys and the people who've got all the attention, you just go, oh, we're using soil wax, but just disappear. And like, how do we stay alive while we're trying to do the right thing the whole time and the rest of the world just isn't? It's really hard.
Emma, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I know it's really hard, but there isn't not just a Green Claims Code. Now there's 3 avenues for people to raise the alarm about greenwashing. So those companies that you're seeing are really on borrowed time. There's many cases a week now, from HSBC to Purcell to Ryanair to, gosh, you name it. I think there's so I think the big guys have got it, and certainly all the ones I speak to are backpedaling really quickly and not using the terms maybe they used to. And I think there's this whole middle ground that haven't got it yet, and they're not being taken to task. So the way people get prosecuted is that customers make complaints. So you complain to the Competition and Markets Authority, which is Green Claims Code. You can now complain to the Advertising Standards Agency, and you can also complain to the third one, which I can't remember, but I'll pop it in the chat. But I think it's Trading Standards. So there's 3 ways now to be caught in that loop. But of course, the consumer doesn't know to complain yet. So I would say it's really changing quite quickly. So I'd say hang in there and be authentic would be my advice. And I'd tell my clients, if you can't back it up, then essentially it's just an opinion. Then it's a small jump between an opinion and a lie, and then you'll miss what's the word? You're deceiving the customer, which is what the guidance is all about, really. Customer comes first. Yeah, but be as authentic as you can. It doesn't mean you can't say things. It just means it needs to be factual. But yeah, I know it's hard. It's always, everything's hardest for us small guys, isn't it?
I'm constantly frustrated by the big claims that these enormous companies make. I rely a lot on Google being marketing, and it's everything: analytics, it's storage, it's cloud, it's word processing, it's spreadsheets, everything for me. So when it comes to doing things like audits on my suppliers and the digital products that I use, it's Google say they're carbon neutral, but I don't really believe them. So I'm there wondering whether me doing that research from a desktop level is enough to then broaden it and say, okay, if I go out, I have literally emailed some of the programs and tools that I use and said, what's your sustainability policy? And they come back and like, oh, interesting question. We don't have one. I'm like, why? So I get that we should all be doing this, and I've tried, and I feel sometimes like you hit a brick wall and then there's so much more to be done that then I become overwhelmed because I've got day-to-day business clients to look after. And then suddenly my time gets absorbed into something that I'm really passionate about and I want to see through, but I feel like it's so big and it's so enormous that taking those small steps, I need a strategy. I need to set out small steps for myself, like you said, with the hosting and with just being a little bit more canny with what I'm doing.
And this is where the carbon literacy comes in, and this is why it is so effective. When I went through and I did it, like I say, this wasn't on my radar. I wasn't engaged with it at all. And I call it the red pill. And then all of a sudden, after the first session, I realized that if I reduced the food waste, so literally just got my kids to stop wasting food, if I didn't buy fast fashion, and I don't anyways, and if I got an air fryer so that when I'm cooking for the kids, I don't heat up a huge range oven, nothing else is actually a problem. And this is where that education piece comes from, where you can see it's these really small, seemingly benign or insignificant steps that make all of the difference. And then when you use some of the technology that we have, it acts just as a list. And we just say, okay, tick this off your list, so you don't even have to do any of the thinking. You just have to do the doing, and it makes it so much easier. I know that Beverly has done that and she's working in fashion. I know that Jane has done that and she's working in digital, and she built our low carbon website because the technology is moving in such a direction that we don't have to overthink a lot of this anymore. The tools exist to just tell us, because this is what's happening on the highest levels. You've got procurement departments, you've got CFOs, you have all of these people who have even less knowledge than we all do. And they're just saying, so-and-so, Bob told me to ask you for the GHG emissions of X, Y, and Z, and then they get it, and then they put it in the computer, and the computer does all the work. And these people don't even know what they're asking for. And that's the world we're moving into. This is just compliance now. And where as small businesses, where you can really stand out is by going beyond compliance, by talking about your frustrations, by bringing this into the work you do with your clients, by saying to a customer, every time you purchase this bag, or if you're a long-standing customer, send us your bag back or the product back, and we can turn it into something else. You all know the brand Veja. When you're green speaking and you're talking about what your business is doing, it starts with that honesty, that openness, and that transparency, so that you can say it with confidence and you're not worrying about using the wrong jargon in this case, and then you don't really know what it means, and then you're worried someone's gonna call the ASA on you.
I think it's interesting that you chose Vega. Is that how you say it? because I really bought into all of this story, and then I bought a pair, and they only lasted about a year, and they've totally fallen apart. And I feel quite let down by them, because I feel like they're saying all the right things and they look cool, but their products, in my experience, don't last. So therefore, I feel quite bitter about the fact that I don't think they are actually sustainable. So it's really interesting that you've chosen them, because I do think the way they tell their story is great, but I don't personally feel like they're following through on their promise.
That is very interesting.
They talk about them being durable and long life, though.
I'm not sure, but I feel like
if they don't,
you're making
then
loads of sustainability claims, and then you're creating products which fall apart within a year. I feel like that in itself.
No, I agree, but in a greenwashing point, you could buy a product that lasts a week, but if they're not claiming that it's durable or long life,
because I could have bought a pair of Adidas or Nikes, and I would still be able to wear them.
Yeah, you often get them. Yeah, synthetics last forever. That's half the problem and half the benefit, I guess.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I think it's really interesting, because they will have had to take that into account in their life cycle analysis.
I mean, maybe I was unlucky. I know that you shouldn't take.
You should definitely feedback though.
I think that for me, it's one of the frustrations I find as a consumer, and then working with brands, is you can get your story all right, but until things have been product tested for a couple of years, I don't it all comes out in the wash eventually. But at that point, consumers have spent hundreds and hundreds of pounds of things, and all of these review sites ask you to review products within 24 hours of purchase, and so many reviews are written like, hey, I've had this bed linen for a week, it's great. I'm like, I want to hear from the people who've had it for 10 years.
And what's great about this is, I love this point, thank you for bringing it, is that as educated consumers, we can also see through the BS. And that can give us confidence to go up against some of these bigger brands, because if you say had a resale, or you had your own trainer brand or something like that, and everyone that you know that bought a pair of these trainers is like, oh my God, they fell apart, you could represent your business and your product in a whole new way that talks about cost per wear or any of those things. So it's the more educated we are, and when we can see people who are, say, doing it best practice, and then we can have a conversation kind of, yeah, but that's not very well made. You can bring that into your own business, and then, and you might say, or Sarah, anybody who's got a product business, lasts for 20 years. Right? Lasts for 20 years. If this lasts for so long, and you don't have to, it's not, and that's, you don't have to call it eco, you don't have to call it planet friendly. Again, in the same way that when you go to their page and they just talk about what it is that they do, how they do it, it's just, this is how we get our stuff, this is how we do it, this is what's behind us, social responsibility. So again, that's not green washing. That's saying we care about the impact that we make on people. And we are embedding that into the business in these ways. And again, using very clear language that describes how they're doing it. And the story behind it. This is all just it's a sustainability storytelling. And everyone's story will start from somewhere. This is how we can support you through this with carbon literacy. And it's 1.5 days over 3 virtual sessions. And you go through, Emma, who was on, is our carbon literacy trainer, and you actually get to the crux of it. And we use technology to do the work for you. So what you won't have to do is go through and do a full comprehensive audit, because we'll connect you to cloud-based technology that will do that for you. I did mine in 48 hours. And the net result, once I got my accreditation, was 30,000 pounds of new business into the company. Because all of a sudden, we could speak as a low carbon service, and it opened the door for grants. It opened the door for new types of partnerships and working with larger organizations that are doing this work, and they want to support small businesses in the transition.
So I'm actually a cut flower grower, and I am obviously trying to educate and move people away from buying flowers that have been flown in, grown as opposed to flown. And so I found it quite interesting, and I was really interested in this seminar to just hear people's point of views, because obviously mine is, in terms of what we were just speaking about, in terms of longevity or durability, it's almost educating people that lasting longer doesn't necessarily mean that's the best option to choose, and trying to educate people that actually it's how it's been made, and that it's okay that my flowers will only last 7 days as opposed to the 14 days that the supermarkets does, because of how they've grown it. And so, yeah, it's just very interesting for me to hear what everybody's take is on this, because I'm up from that point of view, and just trying to make sure that when I do sell or I am showing what I'm doing, I've really stayed away from all the jargon and not really try to use it at all, because trying to be authentic. So I don't use any pesticides, and I don't use any chemicals, and I don't use any plastics. But then my seed suppliers, which is really interesting, I'm going to have to go and have a look and see where I get those from. I'm trying to use my own seeds at the moment and turn that around. But yeah, so just finding it very interesting and keeping really quiet, because I'm quite new on this. So I've only been going for 3 years, but really aware of, really bought into the whole idea of being sustainable and doing my part and using flowers and trying to move people away from wanting roses because that's what they want, but actually wanting, just having the flowers that are in season. So I think that's the journey that I am in, that to buy things that are in season, and just trying to connect that with the right wording when I'm using my website and things. So
love that story.
I'd love to hear, what's one action you're going to do to amplify your sustainability story in the next 24 hours? And if help is useful for you, this is how we can support you through this with carbon literacy. And it's 1.5 days over 3 virtual sessions. And you go through, Emma, who was on, is our carbon literacy trainer, and you actually get to the crux of it. It's a it's a UN-backed accreditation. Patagonia use it, the BBC use it, Rolls-Royce use it, amongst others. And I do call it the red pill, like the Matrix. All of a sudden you will go from 0 to 1. You'll be like, oh my God, I get it. I get it. You can get it all done. And it's just a very quick and easy way to get up to speed. Hey, fantastic. Do finish your assessment, because you'll get some article recommendations and more information on the carbon literacy. So thank you all for joining me today. I hope to see you soon.